It's an exciting time, everybody. It's a brand new edition of the Hog Roundup with ESPN Arkansas's Tye Richardson. As always, that is Tye Richardson. I'm Evan Kamiko. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday. We did record this on Wednesday afternoon, so just to give everyone a heads up, if anything broke last night, we're going to try to avoid that because we've got some really big things to talk about this week. And Tye, let's start at the beginning of the week, really on Saturday, Arkansas-Ole Miss. I want your biggest takeaway from that game because I know there's a lot. I know fans have a lot of opinions on that game. But for you, when you sit back a couple days later, what do you think about when you look at that loss?
Well, it's really been the history of playing in Oxford the last three times you've gone. I mean, you lost by 1 in 21, you lost by 7 in 23, and then you lose by 6 in 25. They've combined 14 points. Sam Pittman's team have battled, they've fought, they've clawed. They just haven't come up with the victory there. Albeit Lane Kiffin doesn't lose a lot of games there. It's a really good football coach. But I think the question you asked Sam in the postgame that while he may not be a fan of that question, every fan wants to know, Coach, why do we keep losing these one-score games? And it's not this constant that keeps popping up. It's not this or that within the football game. It's just frustrating because I had someone tell me this week, well, would you rather get blown up by 21? It's like, no, but at the same time, you would like, as an Arkansas fan, considering you felt like you're in football purgatory for a good chunk of the last 13 or so years, some of these games to go your way, and they just haven't for the majority of not just Sam Pittman, but Brett Bielema, John L. Smith, Chad Morris. It's that snowball effect that with Pittman being at the helm, he's going to get the majority of the blame right now.
And to your point, I think when we look at that question, I was going to bring that up in a little bit, but we'll just jump right to it. When I asked Sam Pittman about it, it wasn't that, hey, man, you keep losing these games. It was, what can your team learn from this game? Then why can this be different? And because let's be honest, it looked different. It just felt different. This team was scoring at will against one of the best defensive coordinators in the SEC, and Pete Golding and his defensive team, albeit, no Walter Nolan, a couple missing pieces in the secondary from the year before, so maybe not as good of a defense. But when you look around the SEC, a lot of high-scoring games this weekend. We could talk about that in a bit. But with that question, it was more taken, I think, out of context by people because you're right. Everybody wants to know, why is 7 and 18 happening? Why do we keep losing these games? Why does this keep popping up? And again, I think Bo Mattingly put it well on his radio show yesterday. You can't necessarily use the past for this season and what happened, but at the same time, you have to, right? You have to tell the story of the coach, and the story of Sam Pittman so far in SEC play has been one-score losses.
Yeah, because when you talk about success, the past oftentimes you refer back to, well, this guy figured it out this year, so he'll figure it out then. The hope is that you can have a closer season to 21 than you had in 22, definitely not 23 and 24. To your point about kind of where it was, that I think a lot of people felt that Taylor Green and company were going to punch it in. Obviously, the fumble from Jaylen Brown, he's distraught after the game. I know you were on the sidelines after that and saw that. So offensively, I think there's a lot to be encouraged about. I think the following that game, you might even be more discouraged in the defense, which I think is, and for Travis Williams, you got to remember, 3 years ago, Lane Kiffin and that offense did not play well. Dart played bad. They did not have a good game in Oxford. Unfortunately for T-Will, last two games, Kiffin has kind of tuned up his defense. And so do they have enough talent on that defensive line, Evan, with Quincy Rhodes and David Oki coming back even healthier this week? I know they played, but maybe not to their standard, and definitely not the amount of snaps. Do you have enough talent, or can you schematically figure out a way to put pressure on quarterbacks? Because a kid in his first FBS start in Trinidad Chambliss looked like he knew what that defense was doing virtually the entire game. So there's cause for hope and reasons to believe that it won't be like last season and seasons before, but there's also reasons to believe it's like, hey, we might be headed for another kind of around 500 year.
Yeah, and Trinidad Chambliss, 400-plus yards of total offense for that team. They absolutely lit them on fire. And again, you're like, well, he's had success at the D2 level with Ferris State. And then he comes here and you're thinking, okay, and it was almost the same problems that they had last year with the secondary. We weren't tackling very well. You were letting a lot of explosive plays. We talked about it, Trey Dare and I, on the Game Day show. It was, you got to be able to limit the explosive plays. They were able to, defensively, Ole Miss gave up a lot, and we saw that Arkansas, one of the best offenses in the country, not to take away anything from the Razorbacks in that side of the ball, but defensively, again, to your point, it's pressure, and that probably caused a lot of the secondary breakdowns, especially in the second half, because you get that stop right out of the gate, and you're thinking, all right, here we go, this could be it, and then it's kind of a lot tighter of a game in the second half than it is the first half. defensively wise for both of those teams.
There were some key moments specifically on third down that stood out to me. There was a play where Ole Miss's tight end got wide open. Caleb Wooden looked like he was trying to communicate something and let his man go. You had the penalty, obviously, on 4th and goal where Ole Miss punched it in after that, which I think Sam Pittman and company set that into the SEC because it didn't, from my angle, it didn't look like much of a pass interference. You had a few other plays in that game. There was a second, I think, in 17, second and goal from the 17, and Arkansas allowed 15 or 16 yards and ended up Ole Miss, I believe, punched in on the next play. So there were key moments in that game defensively where you got Ole Miss in a long third down situation, or at least in a third down. They go 8 of 12, I believe, and converted 66%. So you really, if you're Travis Williams, you guys, we've got to get off the field. If you do that, you're going to give this Taylor Green and this high-powered offense a lot more chances to make plays like we saw them make plenty on Saturday.
I know we've talked a lot about the downer kind of defensive stuff, but we've got to talk about the offense. Not enough people, I think, really around the country are giving flowers to Bobby Petrino's offense. And Taylor Green, absolutely through 3 weeks, looks like a Heisman contender. He's been top 10 in some of these early Heisman season votes. What's impressed you most about QB1?
I think, I know they lost, but to me that's the best game that Taylor's played in a Razorback uniform. You think about being on the road, top 25 opponent, first road game of the season, a lot of new pieces, not just on the offensive line, wide receivers, tight ends. He spread the ball around really, really well these first 3 games. I think what impressed me the most is we credit the offensive line for not allowing a sack during that game, and you have to. Taylor, I felt like, was more secure with the football. I felt like that, again, I don't know every check, I don't know everything, but you could tell he was diagnosing blitzes better than he was last season. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can look at Taylor, who's leading the FBS right now in total yards and a few other categories. As we kind of stated earlier, maybe not enough is being paid. You think about where Taylor was maybe projected in the preseason, probably top 8 or so quarterback. Now there's a lot more people that have him in that upper third, that top 5, top 4, depending on where you look at it. And I think that's really encouraging for Bobby Petrino to see how much he's progressed in 3 games heading to the rest of 2025.
Absolutely. And there's some negatives to take away from the offense. And what really stands out to me right now is the offensive running game, right? Like outside, take away Taylor Green's scramble runs and those yards. Take away the big Mike Washington yards. That's roughly 140 yards or so out of the 211 that Arkansas got. Is the running game concerning that they can't really get consistently going outside of when it comes to not using Taylor?
Sam Pittman got asked about that a week or so ago, and his response was, well, we've scored on a bunch of explosive plays, and he's right. I think you're always going to have that element as an opposing defense that you have to monitor Taylor. So there's going to be games where the D-end or linebacker keys in on Taylor, and Mike Washington is going to have, or Braylon Russell, or if Rodney Hill's in the game, they're going to have open lanes and more of a crease in what they had. Now, they blocked up that long Mike Washington play. The offensive line did a great job at that. But there's always like the balance. If you're passing the ball really well, then your running is going to be good, but maybe not great because you're not focusing on it that much. I think there's at least a wonder is like if the passing game is not working, can you win a game running the football? If you watch that Ole Miss game, there were a couple of goal-to-goal situations with Mike Washington and Braylon Russell. The offensive line mauled Ole Miss. Braylon Russell and Mike inflicted damage, and they scored. Yeah. So that's encouraging, but I think there are some elements, not necessarily for concern, but you're just like, okay, if they take away the passing game, what can Arkansas do offensively running the football?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're 3 games in. It's 4th of the season. Can't believe it already. A couple games lie ahead. We'll talk about those a little bit later. But curious, what's the biggest lesson you've learned about this team through 3 weeks?
I think the offense is better than we thought they would be. I'm really encouraged again by Taylor. I still wonder, true freshman kicker heading into Memphis, not the same environment as it was in Oxford and Vaught Hemingway, but how does Starzik handle pressure, which he'll be on the road once again, then he's back at home for what's probably going to be a ranked opponent in Notre Dame. I heard Fernando Carmona Jr. Give him some props and some encouragement on Tuesday night, and you need, like, if Arkansas is going to be anything this year in football, special teams, like, what you got in Devin Bale. He's an all-SEC type of punter. They need to block better for Cam Shanks. Cam's not really getting any lanes because it seems like you've got the gunners for the other team on top of him as soon as he gets the football. And Starzik, he doesn't necessarily have to go 14 to 15 the rest of the way, but you can't be in a situation on the road you go 0-2 kicking field goals. So I think special teams is still the biggest question mark I have with this team. You kind of know what the defense is, you kind of know what the offense is, but if the special teams ends up being a positive rather than a negative, then who knows what could happen this year.
And Cam Shanks was so explosive last year with UAB. I mean, he had a touchdown against Arkansas, albeit it was a receiving touchdown, but a lot of big returns, and we really haven't seen him break one, whether that's on the kickoffs or, to your point, on the punt returns. It's something you would like to have added because Ole Miss kept pushing Arkansas back into their own 15 to 20-yard line. And you lack that explosive play. A lot of times now at the next level in the NFL, we've seen explosive punt returns. Getting good field position is so important, especially for long sustaining drives. Arkansas hasn't really had too many long sustaining drives this year. So I think the Cam Shanks thing is, maybe people aren't talking about that enough at home. The Cam Shanks, you'd like to see the return game get a little bit better.
Which it's kind of a niche aspect of football. We often okay, we start the quarterback and then we kind of branch off from there. But with Arkansas having a talent deficit, with them having a depth deficit, you have to find other ways to win. And you look at what Lane Kiffin and that team have been able to accomplish the last 4 or so years. Now they've really grown their talent base in Oxford. You mentioned Walter Nolan earlier. They plucked him away from Texas A&M. They got Umulanala for Florida. I said his name wrong, but that defensive line under Kiffin last year was unbelievable because they had all the talent. So if you're Arkansas, you know consistently you're going to play a better overall team than you. Then these little itsy-bitsy details have to go your way. And again, you've got a punter, you've got a former All-American punt returner. You just got to give him some space, and hopefully Starzik can. Again, you don't have to initially go 14 or 15 the rest of the way, but you can't have 0 games on the road in the SEC.
And the good news, the Hogs 2-1 right now after 3 weeks into the season. When we come back, we're talking about Hunter Yurachek and the Little Rock Club. Stick around. Hog Roundup returns after this message from our sponsors. Welcome back into Hog Roundup. Tye Richardson, Evan Kamiko hanging out with you on this Thursday. Tye, it's been the story all week. Hunter Yurachek, the Hogs athletic director, goes down to Little Rock for the touchdown club and sparks up a lot of controversy with his statements. There was a lot that could be made. If you want to go watch it, you can go watch it over on our website as well as KRK. Plenty of places to go watch it. But in short, and correct me if I'm wrong, Hunter Yurachek essentially said, with the NIL, we are behind. He does not believe this football team right now and his program can compete for a national title, but they can compete in the SEC. He also added maybe to get even, we have to look into a third lane. And that's just the short of what he said. He said a lot more than that, and a lot of it was true, but there was also a lot that left, I think, Hog fans furious and wanting answers. And when you sit back, when you take a breather and think about it, what stood out to you most?
He's honest. We advocate for honesty all the time from our coaches and our athletics directors, and he gets lambasted for doing that. So you can look at it from that perspective. I think when you think about Hunter's comments, because there's a couple different ways you can go about it. We'll start with the Lane comment first that you brought up. I'll reference what we were talking about earlier in Ole Miss. Keith Carter and that athletics department are just dominating right now relative to some other places because they feel like they're in a great spot with Lane Kiffin. They've got a good recruiting base in Mississippi, and Mississippi State, while they did win earlier this year against Arizona State, has been down relative to what they had. And so what you always do as an Arkansas fan is you compare and contrast of some programs that you think are either the same level, a little above you, or a little below you. And a lot of Arkansas fans perceive Ole Miss to be below them, and they've thought that for quite some time. And history tells you sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not. I think when you look at Hunter's comments about the lane, it's a very gray, blurry area, right. And it has been. Once this thing fleshes out, I think we'll have a better idea what's illegal and what's not. But college athletics for years, you didn't pay players until July 1st, I think 2021 is when it officially, that changed. NIL came to fruition. And Arkansas did not capitalize on that 9-win season like they should have. Hunter was very vocal, very against NIL and some of the things with it. And I think as an AD, again, he handles far greater things than I do as just a disc jockey, basically. But I think for him, whether he wants to admit this in public or not, he made a mistake in not handling that 21 season how they did. If you remember, Ole Miss also had a successful 21 season. That was the battle where you lost 52-51, I believe, in Oxford that day. And I think we're seeing not just Arkansas and Ole Miss, you could say Arkansas and Missouri, programs that, again, from our vantage point, they could be the same, they should be the same in some people's eyes, and yet the trajectory of what's going on in Columbia and what's going on in Oxford is far different than what's going on here in Fayetteville.
It's really interesting because, right, like Arkansas's never going to be in Alabama. They're never going to be Georgia, right? You're not going to have the top tier. You're not going to be Texas. You're not going to have that top tier revenue, and whether that's being able to get big donors. There are big donors in the area that they could be able to do it, right? But like you're not those powerhouse programs. So how do you do it alternatively? What stood out to me is that one, an athletic director is coming out and saying, yeah, we're just not competitive. Like even if that is true, which we know it is, I don't understand the thinking behind, we just like coming out and saying that. Now, honesty to your point is absolutely right. But you've got to give hope to your fan base. And mentality, I think, starts from the top down. And if the top is saying, well, we just can't win, what about the players who just showed you on the field this weekend that, hey, we can hang with the top teams in the SEC. We can hang with the Ole Misses. We know our offense is good enough to hang. Like what that mentality, I think, is it trickles down. And it is so deflating, I think, as a player. And I've been on teams, and again, I'm not comparing myself to Arkansas and what's going on, but you've been on teams where coaches just don't have any energy and don't have any enthusiasm and positivity, and that trickles down all the way.
Mm-hmm. I think from the vantage point you're talking about, there have been coaches here in the past that you felt like, man, we might not win a championship with this guy, but it's going to be a situation where you're at least going to battle and war for him. And I'm not saying that's what's going on with Sam. I will say there has been a good bit of feedback from the fans that saying Sam doesn't necessarily inspire them in press conference and whatnot. My pushback to that is like Bobby Petrino is one of the worst press conference sound bites from an energy standpoint, but no one cared then because he won games. Sam's ability or inability in press conference shouldn't matter. It's his whole regime here is dictated on the win-loss record. And I think from that standpoint about the championship that you referred to of Hunter's comments in Little Rock earlier this week, he's not wrong.
Right.
Like Arkansas right now is not in a position to win a championship. That's 100% a fact. Now you can debate whether they should be or not. The goal of this program, in my opinion, nowadays, with the college football playoff at 12 teams, probably going to move to 16, is you need to be in that Ole Miss, Missouri, and South Carolina lane last year. 9-3, close on the table. Is it going to happen every year? No. But you can at least put yourself in the conversation, in the playoff selection show conversation. It's like, hey, this team could be. We saw what that team was back in 2021 where they're 8-4 regular season. Would they have been in? No. But they lost one game by one to Ole Miss. They lost to Bryce Young in Alabama by 7. Didn't have a great game against Georgia that year, 36-0. But you could at least present yourself in the conversation as a ranked team. That's what fans want. That's what they're hoping for. They know 64 is the anomaly. They know they know there's some other years, but this team has been to an SEC championship. In fact, they've been in 1995, they've been in 2002, and they've been in 2006. So what you're telling me nowadays is that money is it can be an excuse and a reason at the same time. I know Trey talked with Peyton Hillis earlier this week. He's not the only one that thinks about that way that's a former player. Because what you're telling them, basically, in my opinion, that doesn't mean it's right, is that, well, what you guys did was different. You can't do it now. And I think about guys that established and put in so much time like Peyton did, and effort, Darren, Felix. I actually talked to a guy that was on the 69 team. He's frustrated where not just the football team is right now, but where college athletics is. I think fans have a right to be mad, but at the same time, again, Hunter told what is reality. So it's like a back and forth dilemma. If you're an Arkansas fan, it's like, I hate that he said it, but at the same time, it's kind of true. So you kind of, it's an inner battle back and forth you have as an Arkansas fan.
The difficult thing for me, to your point of like, hey, if Arkansas wins 8 to 9 games, that's happy. Winning 8 to 9 games, that's competing for a college football playoff spot. We saw an Alabama team last year that basically the fan base cried because they won 9 games, and the playoff committee put an Indiana team and an Arizona State team that weren't, or Arizona State won their conference, but an SMU team that weren't proven like Alabama might have been and had the big wins in over it. So, like, you're telling me that you can compete in the SEC to get 8-9 wins, but you can't win a national. Like, that is the sweet spot right there. If you can get into the playoff, and you have to have the mentality of we can win the whole thing, we can get it, right? Like, it's not, well, we can compete. Competing is winning 8 to 9 games, and I think that's fair. but you've got to believe you've got a chance.
And let's talk about that word competing for a sec, because under Sam Pittman, they competed since game one. The Georgia game, for those that don't remember, is 2020. Bulldogs come in here, COVID year. Traylon Burks scores in that first half. You're up 7-0. You're up at halftime on the defending national champion, if I remember that right. Of course, Stetson Bennett comes in and they get it done in the second half. But from the moment Sam has stepped onto campus, they have competed. So at least on the field.
Right.
Now, rare is it they'll probably have one blowout game a year like Ole Miss last year, but rare is it that they're getting blown out multiple times in any given season. So I think my question to Hunter would be, is what is your version of competition? Is your version of competition in the SEC losing close? Because if that's the case, you can't really be disgruntled or mad at Sam. But if it's competing to be in that like top tier of the SEC, then that's not. You mentioned the Alabama last season. Obviously, Alabama fans were having conniptions based on what happened last year.
Yeah.
If you remember how great it was in 2021 when Arkansas was 4-0, they're heading to Georgia, 8-1, college game day. Now, again, that game didn't go according, but fans, even after that blowout loss and some other tight losses that season, they were thrilled with where the season was. It doesn't take an Alabama level of success for fans to be happy here. And like the idea that, well, I don't know what's going to happen if this happens, or, well, this is just what Arkansas is. If you have that mentality in life, then you're never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So Hunter, I think if Hunter had it over, he probably wouldn't have said what he said this week. But I think one last thing.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was brought to my attention, I don't know if it's true or not, maybe that was a way for him to take some pressure off Pittman. I have no idea. I don't know if that entered Hunter's psyche at all when thinking about Sam, but the pressure hasn't been on Sam Pittman as of about 12:30, 1 o'clock on Monday. It has been all on Hunter. Whether that's fair or not, it's true. You're heading in this game, group of 5, Memphis, one of the better teams in the last 10 or so years, so maybe this team will play free this week. Who knows? And maybe that's just conjecture and a conspiracy on my part. Who knows?
Yeah, we don't know, but it'll be fun to talk about. Let's move forward. A really interesting conversation. I'm sure we could have gone another 45 minutes on that if we really wanted to, but we don't have that much time here on PTN Extra. When we come back, we preview Memphis. Stick around. Actually, this is Hog Roundup, not PTN Extra. I'm confusing my shows. We'll be right back after the break. Stick around. Welcome back here to the Hog Roundup. Tye Richardson, Evan Kamiko. Tye, let's wrap up shop. Let's talk about Week 4. Arkansas gets back on the football field. They get a chance to avenge that loss to Ole Miss against Memphis. Your initial thoughts on this game?
It's going to be a fun one. You know what's crazy is Memphis actually leads this all-time series. They've caught Arkansas in some good times on the football field for it. Razorbacks have won the last 2. Another opportunity for Talon in this case. You're in prime time on ESPN. Now you're on national television, ABC. There's going to be a lot of people watching that aren't Arkansas or Memphis fans. And you mentioned the word Heisman earlier. I know Taylor was on that Heisman podcast earlier this week. I'm not ready to put him in that discussion yet, but he sure has been excited in these first 3 games. And what you're just hoping is that offense continues to flourish and get better. That's what's crazy, I think, about these first 3 games is, yes, you didn't really play competition in the first 2. Is this a great defense on Saturday? No. But this is another chance for the offense to get more cohesive and get better because you got Notre Dame coming in next week. I think what's interesting about the SEC this year, so we've talked about how dominant it's been for a number of years. Defensively, there's not really anyone you're truly worried about until November, Evan, with Texas and LSU. Like when you look at Tennessee, Notre Dame, Mississippi State, A&M, there's no one that jumps off the page defensively. Not to say that Taylor can put up 400-plus yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns each and every game, but based on where the SEC has been defensively in years past and where it currently is in 2025, I think there's a lot of excitement you could expect from Taylor Green in this offense here in the next 9 games.
I think it's going to be really important for the Arkansas defense to bounce back. Another quarterback that's really good at RPO. Yeah, Arkansas did a good job against Cornelius Brown and then against A-State at stopping that. But again, Trinidad Chambliss. And I think it's because Chambliss went more east-west rather than north-south really to get the offense going. And I expect the same thing to happen with Memphis this weekend is maybe they go a little bit more horizontal rather than vertical right away. So if they can stop that and they can come back and the defense can show up this weekend, you know, maybe the conversation changes next week before Notre Dame.
I think what you heard in the offseason is about the defense being bigger, and it hadn't necessarily lent to speed. Offense-wise, looked pretty fast. I mean, I saw CJ and Jalen, and Taylor's obviously broken. They've broken a lot of tackles, and you've seen that straight line speed. And that's, again, something you can look forward to as an Arkansas fan.
Right.
I don't know how you fix speed nearly a fourth of the way through the season, but that is something that I wonder, especially with those mixed tackles you talk about. Got to get guys on the ground. This guy this weekend is not going to be the only dual threat quarterback you'll face the rest of the way. If they get picked apart again this weekend, it could be a long defensive season for Travis Williams in this unit.
Yeah, and the questions and the hot seat will continue to ramp up. I think it's pretty cool right now, let's be real, but like you've said, if it continues to trend this way, who knows the conversations we're having in a couple months. Tye, your prediction for this weekend before we go?
I think Arkansas wins by 7. That line's kind of been hovering right around a touchdown. If you remember last season when the Razorbacks lost against Oklahoma State, they did not play good against Camp Shakes and UAB the following week. Won that game 37-27, I believe, and it really took them into the second half to fully knock them out, the Blazers out. So I think Arkansas, again, you're going up against one of the better Group of 5 opponents in the last 10 or 15 years. You're going up against a coach that I think is 29-5 in his last, or maybe it's in his last 29 games, he's only lost 5. It was a good stat in whole hog sports. So really just I think a tough game that Arkansas will maybe come out a little emotionally lacking just because of what happened last week. Right. But I think ultimately in the end, Taylor and Green Company do enough offensively to win this football game.
I agree. I like the Hogs. I like the bounce back. That is Tye Richardson. I'm Evan Kamiko. As always, thank you for tuning into the Hog Roundup. We'll see you back here very soon.